Right guys, welcome back to this week's video. Unfortunately, me and Steve got a little bit excited this week and we actually forgot to do a start up on the Tuesday, because again, bank holiday Monday, so another short week. We forgot to do the video Tuesday morning. It's now Wednesday morning and we've done quite a bit of work. So what we're going to do, we're going to backpedal a little bit. We're going to tell you exactly what we did yesterday and this morning, and then I'll show you what Steve's doing the rest of today and what we're hoping to achieve on the car by the end of play today, and see how we get on.
Right guys, as Paul said, this week's mainly all going to be about the cam shipping car, Andy Kirkleys. So as you can see, we got a bit excited yesterday and started throwing shiny bits at it. So the front subframe's been powder coated. We had this done quite a while ago, but again we've fitted that to the car. You can see it's had the additional bits welded on for the engine mounts. Normally this wouldn't be there on a road car, so that's there for obviously the race car. And it's been seam welded and stuff, so that'll have been done by Andy Rouse. Track control arms, they was obviously a bit scabby, so we blasted them, we've painted them. The original inner rose joints was alright, it was just the outer ones that were no good. So if you look at this one, this is one of the original rose joints. What we're checking for is any play, so that, I don't know if that's picking it up on camera, but
yeah, you can see that. There's
a bit of play on that, so obviously small bit of play there will end up, by the time it gets back to steering wheel, you'll notice that quite considerably. So that's one of the things we've done. These are all brand new uprights, so these are basically our uprights to replace the originals, because again they were a bit scabby. Brand new Bilstein inserts, springs, the £975 springs. That's what Andy wanted us to put in, so we've done that. So the lower ball joint was damaged, or not damaged, but it was worn, so that's a new lower ball joint that we've fitted, along with a new bolt and the new bobbins, so all that's done. These actually bolt in from inside, so you take this plate off, you put the bolt through and there's a nylock nut on the inside of there, and then obviously this goes back on again. So that was the front end of yesterday. And then the back end, you'll have seen the diff was already built up on the floor. I did the inspection on the diff last week. But what we had done is we'd blasted and painted the upper diff mount. And one thing we noticed as well is that on the Rouse cars, they only use 2 bolts on the rear cross member. And on the Eggenberger cars, they actually use all 4. So that's just one of the differences, if anyone's wondering what are the differences between the 2 cars. That's obviously where the oil pump goes. So there is an oil pump on this for a diff cooler. So there'll be I think it's on this side, an oil cooler mounted, and it just pumps oil around. New rear shockers, these were new, so these were put in when the shell was fabricated. And basically on this car, so if you remember back to when we were putting all the suspension on the Eggenberger car, we had the springs on a part of like a standard coilover. Well, on the Rouse cars they put inboard springs, as per original road car, and this is obviously how you adjust the rad height, and there's a small nylon insert just so that the spring's not sat directly on the steel arm. So yeah, we got that in yesterday.
We put all the arms in this morning with all new nuts and everything. Them alloy packers are what Andy made, which is what he uses to adjust the camber on the rear end.
There's obviously a brace, because again on the Eggenberger cars, this point of the the beam is tied into the roll cage from factory in 2 points. So obviously when Rudy built this, he recognised that this was a point of flex, so he tied it into the cage, being the strongest part of the car. Obviously the Rouse built cars were not tied into the cage, so they fabricated this beam to try and take some flex out of the main beam. But obviously on the Eggenberger cars, that's not there because it's not needed, because it's tied into a more substantial part of the car.
But what we will point out is we actually did on this car for Andy. You'll see there, and whether you can see it or not, I don't think you can. There's a bolt behind there. You can see the head of the bolt there. That bolt goes into the roll cage. So what we did, we actually did that as an addition for this car. We have actually tied this rear beam into the roll cage to make it, well, we believe a better way of doing it. So we haven't lost any originality of the rear beam. It's still exactly the same as it was when Rouse built the car. We've just actually made it a little bit better by tying it into the cage, as Steve says, like the Eggenberger cars did. So that's where we are up to now. What I'll do now is Steve is going to show you roughly what he's done this morning and what he's going to be doing this afternoon for the rear anti-roll bar.
So what are we doing today? So I started off with the rear anti-roll bar. So these are the brackets that, obviously the original Rouse brackets. I've cleaned all them up. They were blasted. I think Paul blasted them last week. But what there was loads of big gouges in here and bits of weld missing, and it didn't look particularly pretty. So I basically built the plate back up with some more weld and dressed it in a bit before I painted it. But they basically bolt on the car, if I've got the right side.
No, that's the other side.
There, like that. So they bolt up on the car, and obviously anti-roll bar comes through on the nylon bushes here. So I'll get that. That'll be one of my jobs for today, is to get that bolted on now that I've painted it. Obviously
we'll put that on time lapse maybe so people can see you doing it.
That's obviously the bar itself. Another job that we'll do today is, these are the original rear spindles off the car. You can see one of the drive pegs is bent. So what these do is, obviously you have no wheel nuts, you just have one big centre lock. So in the back of the wheels there's drillings. As the wheel goes on, it slots over these pegs, and that transfers basically the drive from the axle through to the wheels. And obviously it also locates the brakes and stuff. So we've got another drive peg. It's just a case of, looking at that, I'll probably end up having to cut that off, to be honest, pushing it out or pressing it out and putting a new stud in. So I'll check the others, because that one actually looks like it's slightly bent as well. I don't know how easy
I think it is, yeah.
So we'll check all of them on both sets. We've ordered the bearings this morning. We should hopefully see them by end of week.
They're the bearing carriers. So what we're going to do is obviously mask all them up so we don't get any sand or grit inside where the bearings sit. We'll be careful of that. You can't paint that area there, because that area locates into the rear beam like that. We won't push it in because it'd be tight. So we'll give them a blast, a coat of paint to make them look nice before Steve builds them up and puts the new bearings in.
Yeah, so
well, that's your job for today, Steve, and I'll just toss it off an handset phone like I do normally every day while Steve works. So we'll update you, and as I say, we'll put it on time lapse to give you a bit of insight into what he does. Right guys, it's midweek, Wednesday evening, halfway through the week, so we thought we'd do a quick update of where we are so far with Andy's cam shipping car. My job today, one of them has been the steering rack and the steering joint, so I've had to obviously clean that up, but we've actually blasted it, primed it, painted it and then fitted it. So, you know, you look and think, well, there's not a massive amount done today, but it isn't just a case of taking everything off a shelf and putting it on. We have a lot of work to do behind the scenes before we can fit anything really. At the back, one of the little jobs I've done is the bearing carriers here. We've stripped those, cleaned them all out, made sure they're perfect inside. Obviously cleaned that surface area where it mounts in, and I've blasted them and painted those, ready for the bearings, which I ordered today, which we were told will be a Friday. So then we can put the bearings in, put the spindles back in, like that, and then we can assemble the rear end. We'll give all them a clean up first before we put those in. So that's part of my job today, along with helping Steve a little bit with what he's been doing. But I'll let Steve tell you what he's been doing today.
Right guys, as Paul mentioned, he's give you a bit of a brief on what he's done, so I may as well tell you what I've been up to. So the calipers had obviously already been refurbed. They came to us already done. All we've done is basically made sure that they fit the car. There's nothing wrong with any of the bolts. So basically locating the bolt in, and obviously that sounds like an easy job normally. Just grab the bolts out of the box, but we'll show you as we get further around the car just what we've been dealing with. It's a challenge, but we like a challenge. So yeah, calipers are on. Again, so make sure all the threads are good. This is the type of stuff that you get further on in the build and it'll catch you out if you haven't checked the threads over. Make sure that the bolt that's go with it are not damaged and all the rest of it, and you ain't got to order them, because now's the time to order them if you need them, not at the final minute. So that was on the front of the car. On the back of the car, obviously we had a couple of bent drive pegs in the rear spindles. So what I've done is I've pressed these ones out, put a couple of new ones in, so there's no longer any bent drive pegs in there. So as soon as the bearings turn up on Friday, that'll go in. Anyone wondering, there's actually 2 bearings per hub. So normally on a car you've just got 1 wheel bearing, but on these you've got an inner and an outer. So it's twice the expense because you've got to buy 8 bearings to build a car. As Paul mentioned, he's done the hub, the bearing carrier. We've put the arms on. We've found the springs. So these are the same spring rate as the front, 985, I think they were. That's what Andy wanted, so that's what we've put on. Again, these are not set up. These are just, you know, basics. And then what we'll do once the car's fully put together and rolling, then we'll go and the engine's in and everything, and it's the right weights, and it will go around the whole car. We'll spanner check it. We'll set all the rad height and the tracking and turn the camber and all the rest of it. Rear anti-roll bar, you'll have seen the video of me putting that together. So basically what happened, or what's happened in the past, is this bracket here has made a hell of a mess of this. So I got the TIG out and dressed it all up and repainted it. Looks a lot better, so I got that on. Rear arms, we put them on this morning. I cleaned all these up. Again, to dismantle all that, strip all that down from, you know, it was all quite rusty and what have you. Clean it all and rebuild it. It's not a 2-minute job. So yeah, it takes quite a bit of time. Again, rear calipers, gathered all the bolts up, cleaned all the bolts, made sure there was no damage to any of them, thread chased them and all the rest of it, and then put them on it. It's a time-consuming job. But I think we should probably have a look at how the bits came to us. Now, obviously, this wasn't nothing to do with the owner's fault. He, due to unfortunate circumstances, passed it off to be restored by somebody else, and they kind of stripped the car. Didn't really look after the parts. I mean, if you watch any of our other videos, you'll see I normally bag everything up as I take it off. I mean, you can see that's not been done here.
It's been it's time consuming, as Steve says.
Yeah, I mean, every single one. It's not only that, but when you start throwing stuff in boxes like that, you can't just assume nothing's damaged. Every little piece has got to be inspected and cleaned, you know, and then checked before it goes back on the car. And that's just what takes the time. There's nothing we can do about that. You can't speed up the process. If you don't do it, you end up with a worse final product. So it's just unfortunate, but that's basically what we're dealing with. And what is good is it's quite satisfying when you pull a part out, you identify it, you clean it up, and you put it back on the car, and it looks like that. So yeah, I think me and Paul are over the moon with how it's looking, really.
Yeah, we're enjoying it, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's very satisfying, as Steve says, when you're given a box of bolts and that's all you're given, a car that you never stripped, and then we can make it look as good as we can. We're doing our best. We're putting a lot of brand new nuts and bolts in such areas that we carry a lot of bolts in stock. So where we can, we're replacing with brand new just to make it, nicer and a better job. But obviously there's a lot of special bolts, and they're the ones that me and Steve are having to rake through boxes to find and clean before we can put things back together. So it does take a little bit of time. It takes longer than, if we'd have stripped this car and we'd have taken everything out and then blasted all the bolts, had them all plated, it would have been a far easier job. But we are where we are, and we're getting there. And we're pleased with what we've done so far.
I think the other thing is as well, there's no Haynes manual for these. You can't just pull a manual up on the internet on how to put one of these together. These are built at this point from like knowledge and experience. So it's very handy having someone like Paul who you can go over to and say, have you seen this before? Does this look right? Yes, no, what do you think? It's not something anyone could probably tackle in the garage. It's definitely a big project. Yeah, built up, the knowledge is built up over the years. It's not something you can pick up in 2 minutes. So hopefully you can see the kind of work we do down here.
Right, guys, it's Thursday morning, so we'll just give you a quick update where we are and what we're on with today. So we're fitting the pedal box, or Steve's fitting the pedal box. I've blasted and painted the throttle pedal and its bracket because it looked like it had been sort of left in a swamp for a few months. So we've cleaned that up, made that look a bit prettier. What we're doing is trial fitting the old cylinders. We're going to put some new ones in, but what we're going to do is make all the brake pipes up, because this car originally ran, as you can see, original old school copper brake pipes, and we're doing it exactly as near to as it was originally as we can. So we're going to make all them up, and then we're trial fitting things like this, which is the box that the bottles, and that sits in there and bolts up onto bulkhead there. So again, we can make all the pipes up, and what we'll do, we'll take things like this off, we'll clean them all up, straighten them down, and dolly, make them look a bit sexier. And that's it, I think, so far today. Right, guys, it's got to that time of week again. It's now Friday evening, So we thought we'd just sort of recap where we are and where we've got to with Andy's cam shipping car. Obviously, you'll have probably already seen in the video a lot of time lapse of us putting the rear end in, Steve putting the rear anti-roll bar on, blah, 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 blah. And other bits that you won't have seen is the tank at that side there has got all the bottles in for the brake fluid. We've had to clean that up, do a couple of repairs on it, straighten it up a little bit, reseal the old bottles, put all new seals and that in them. So that's that done. Steve's temporarily put in the brake reservoirs, and he'll tell you why in a minute what he's been up to. All the front ends now in, complete, done, which is good. All the back ends in. We've had the bearings. They came, well, about 10 minutes ago, didn't they, Steve? Otherwise, we were hoping they would have been here earlier today so we could have got all the rear drive shafts and the rear hubs built up, but they've just arrived and there they are. So we've got those, 4 of those, because there's 2 per each side. So that's a job for Monday. Steve will do that and finish the rear end. We've done things like we dragged out the fuel lift pump bracket that sits in the boot with the filter. We looked at the lift pumps. They worked, but they were a bit old. So we spoke to Andy and he agreed, yeah, put 2 brand new ones in. So we fitted those, piped them in ready so they can go back in when we're ready for them. And I think that's it for me. So Steve will tell you what he's been doing this week.
Yeah, so as Paul mentioned, we had a few bits turn up end of play today. There's the bits that have been vapor blasted just over there. You want to grab them?
Yeah.
So again,
I'll pass that to you to hold on to.
We use molten aqua blast.
Vapor.
Molten vapor blast.
Dave McKinley is called.
And again, look how good do they
He
look.
does these for us and he's done a fantastic job. I'll drag some of the rest of them over. Just to give you an idea, obviously this is the one of the original water header tank. Now, obviously these are 35 years old, and as we've mentioned before, Andy's car has probably been used more than any other touring car, RS500, than any other in the world. So they've got a bit worse for wear. So what we've done, we've had them aqua blasted. So I think you'll agree that when they're put back in, they'll look quite nice. We thought about having them polished, but there's quite a few deep scratches and one thing and another on them, so they wouldn't have polished up and look the best. So aqua blasting them, or vapor, what they call it, is the way forward.
I think the main reason we went for it is it gives a nice uniform finish. Like if you look at that tank there, we could Scotch Brite that, but then you see all the little Scotch Brite marks and all the rest of it, whereas if you aqua blast it, everything gets the same finish all over.
Yeah.
Cleaning marks as such. Obviously that's one of the reasons that we go for, and also if there's any little bits of repair that we need to weld up, it's the cleanest way to get it prior to welding.
I mean, I think that's a perfect example. What this is the fuel swirl pot. This actually sits in the boot of the car. That sits flush with the boot floor, and this actually sits lower than the boot floor itself. So this gets peppered with stones and grit, as you can see there. It gets absolutely peppered. Well, you know, without spending hours and hours and hours with a sander trying to get rid of it, and you'll probably end up rubbing through in places. We think that when that's mounted back in the floor with all its nice new fittings in, it'll look nice. So it's sort of a good compromise to polishing everything back up, but he's done quite a few bits for us. Engine mountings, which, as Steve said, that one needs a repair on it. So we'll dress that up, clean that up. Steve will re-weld that. And then Dave said to us, if we want to run them back to him, he'll just blow in that area again with the blaster to make it all evenly match, throttle brackets. So yeah, that's lucky that came back today. So again, we can start hopefully putting a lot of this back together, fit some bits to the car, start building the engine back up. I've got the block to paint on the engine, and then we can start reassembling that. So we're happy. So I'll let Steve carry on telling you what he's been doing this week.
Yeah, so we've had the stuff come back from Vapor Blast. Obviously that'll give us something to be on with next week. So this week I obviously drilled the strut tops. I just want to point out it wasn't me who drilled through the chassis number. That was already there. I've only drilled the ones on each side, so I did them. I finished them off this week and got them in so we could get all the front end and that bolted up. But what I've been doing Thursday, Friday, or into Thursday, Fridays, I've been doing all the brake pipes. So if I take that out of the way, you can see the brake piping. And this car, obviously, we've done it back as original. So it did run copper brake pipes. Like a lot of them was braided all the way through. Well, this car was actually copper piped, obviously, and then flexes the other side of here. So I've done them all the same because Andy wanted to keep originality. So I've piped all them up under there in copper. The wheels, so the master cylinders are in. So we use 0.625 on the front and then a 0.75 on the rears. They're obviously just mock-up ones. We have got new ones on order, so when the new ones come, they'll be fitted. That tank that was here is where the reservoirs sit. So this runs an hydraulic clutch. So there's obviously 2 reservoirs, one for the front brakes, one for the rear, and then we've got one for the clutch as well. So I've been on with that. We dragged all these out and we've temporarily put these in place because when we're routing things, we want to make sure that it's not in the way. So we've just thrown everything in it that we can. I cleaned up the breather tank. That was another thing that I did. Again, get it in position, and then when we're routing wiring and stuff, we know where to go with it. This is the coil pack bracket, and this is obviously an insulated block. So what we'll have is the battery lead will come up to here, and then it'll come from here down to the starter motor and what have you in the engine bay. So they use that as like a termination block or a joiner. Rather than having 2 bits of wire joined as it comes through and it flaps around, you can then use that as a positive terminal and you can put various positive points to it.
And that was one of my little jobs this week. I stripped that, blasted it and give it a lick of paint, put some new bolts in and bolted that back in.
And then if we look inside, you can see more of the brake pipes that I've been on with. So again, all in copper as per original. And I put the brake bias in as well. So that's obviously for the brake bias for the rear. That's an original part. This bracket we obviously still need to clean up, but I've put that in just so I can get all the piping routed. We haven't got any photographs of the inside, so I've had to look at where existing holes were in the floor and a little bit of guesswork, but we think that runs pretty nice, comes over the top of where the rear seat would normally bolt in the car. I think it looks pretty good.
And he's obviously he knows my OCD, does Steve, so he's done a really, really nice job of folding them neatly, making them line through perfectly. All the clips are a perfect distance apart. So yeah, he's living up to my very weird expectations.
So yeah, I was on with that. As Paul said, he did the fuel pump brackets, and then I spent a bit of time. I put drive pegs back into these, and these are actually, I guess you'd probably call them wheel fans or disc fans.
Cooling fans.
So they bolt onto the back of the spindle, and then your disc will sit on here, and this will obviously gather air in as the wheels spin and direct airflow onto the disc to keep the brakes cool.
Well, I will say that in all my years, I've only ever seen these on this car. They're not something that was ever used in British touring cars, Australian, European, everywhere. This was simply on the Japanese cars. And obviously because of their temperatures and humidity there, the car suffered badly with overheating brakes, overheating engines. So these were fitted when this car went over to Japan after 1988. It raced in Japan. They were then retrofitted there, and we'll show you at a later date. There's some real big aluminium air scoops that actually sit round these fans and drag air in, direct the air to them fans. And as you can see, they drag the air in and cool the disc. So they're quite a trick little thing that is only fitted to this car. So it'd be nice to see them up and working when we get them fitted.
So we'll lift the car up. Is the ramp on still? Yeah. No.
Hang on, you'll have to turn it on, Steve. I think some idiot turned it off.
Turn the ramp on. So we'll lift this up. We've now got Andy sent over the anti-roll bar mounting blocks, which also the compression struts bolt to. So I give them a clean up earlier on this morning. We got them on, and we've got the compression struts. So other than the track rod end, that's basically the front suspension all together now. We've obviously got the discs to go on. We did find a bit of an issue with the front bells, so we got the front discs sent up today. We checked the front bells, and around the mounting pegs, or around the drive pegs, they've started to oval. And we think that the wheels have potentially come loose at some point in their life, and it's started to oval around the drive pegs, the discs. So we're going to get some new bells made. These are obviously drive pegs. What happens is that there's holes in the bell that locate around here, and these have become oval, so the disc could rattle. So that's something that we need to get sorted. But these are the anti-roll bar brackets. Give them a bit of a clean up and bolted them on. These are obviously our compression struts, because we don't think the car had any, or we couldn't find them, or they were damaged or whatever it was. So we've obviously replaced it with them ones. We've just got front anti-roll bar to put on when it comes back from powder coat. And then if we move to the back, you'll have seen me bolting on the rear anti-roll bar, but this morning I also cleaned up the pump. Now it's one of them where we could have stripped it down completely and painted every single part of it, but to leave it like that is originally how it was. It's clean, and I quite like the fact that it's got some originality to it, rather than it looking like we've tried to make everything look like new.
I think you've hit a good point there, Steve. You know, there's always a balance when you're doing any car, and Andy's very, very proud of this car, the fact that it's been used and always has been used for the 20 years he's had it. And he wants it nice. He wants it to look back like it was new, but at the same time, we are trying to, you know, be realistic and not make it look like it's just rolled off a concourse show field. So there is a balance between, if it looks okay, as that does, it looks clean. I say Steve's cleaned it in parts washer. You know, the Goodrich fittings have got a few little marks and that on them, but they're perfectly usable. There's nothing wrong with them. They're sealed. The pipes are in good condition. So why replace it for the sake of making it look brand new when it isn't? So, you know, we're trying to get a nice balance for him and keep the car, you know, a lot of the original parts, but yet make it look nice.
Right guys, that's another end of week for us. We seem to be flying through the year, but hopefully you can see we're getting through plenty of work. I'll let Paul tell you, well, I'm away. Well, I'll be here Monday, and then I'm away for another 2 weeks. So I think Paul will be in building the engine up, but I'll let him tell you what his plans are for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, I'm on my own again, and Steve's away enjoying himself. My plan is I'm going to try and get the engine completely built back up now. We've got a lot of the parts back, get the block painted, get everything built back up so it's ready to drop in, hopefully.
It's not a video.
Every week, innit? Every week. Hang on, it's Father Christmas again, seeing what I want. So yeah, I'm hoping to get the engine ready to drop in. The gearbox, we'll give that a good steam clean off, make that look nice. So hopefully when Steve comes back, I'll have moved the car on to a point where we can really move forward, and you'll see hopefully see a big difference in the car.
Well, hopefully that rounds up or gives you an insight into what we've done this week. We don't really promote ourselves as much. I think we're 10 videos in now. So if there's any Facebook pages that you're on and you think, you know, your members might appreciate them, whether it's 90s classic cars, 80s classic cars, restoration pages, feel free to share these videos and help promote us. And also, we do enjoy reading all your comments. So if you've got anything you want to ask a question on or something you might want to say, feel free to ask.
Yeah, we do read every comment, but obviously time constraints, it is almost impossible to reply to everybody. So please don't be offended if we don't reply. But you know, we do our best. But yeah, we do really, really appreciate you coming and viewing the videos, and hopefully we shall see you on the latest one in a couple of weeks.